Welcome to Letters to Louie with Abby Algiers. Welcome, Abby.
Hi, Sally.
We chose another letter for this month of April and awaiting the next generation.
Right. Awaiting the generation that might
Oh,
bring us peace.
yes.
That might bring peace
Yes.
to the
And in
world.
this letter that you're going to read to us, it's your dad's reflection, Dr. James Algiers' reflection of a time during not only the draft, but all other conflicts and people that he knew that were sent.
Correct. Throughout history, just how wars has affected
Yeah,
humanity.
great. So I'll go ahead and let you read
Okay.
that, and then we'll discuss it.
Great. One of my earliest memories of school at St. Killian's Grade School was an Armistice Day speech by a man named Geo Kolb, who had been a soldier in World War I, known at that time in 1934 as the War to End All Wars. Each November 11th at 11 o'clock, the town whistles would blow, the lights would dim, and for a minute or so, all would recall the ending of the First World War. Programs would be held at each grade school, the North Side School, the South Side School, and St. Killian School. A musical program of 1 hour of patriotic songs would be held at the high school. At 11 a.m., a minute of silence would be observed throughout the city, in the stores, the shops, and on the streets. The moment was universal, the hope eternal. George Kolb, who later became the county services officer, was a good speaker, and he gained the attention of the students at St. Killian School. All in the small auditorium were quiet for the program and most attentive. In the days before slideshows and DVD presentations, attention was gained by the enthusiasm of the speaker and the context of the speech. Mr. Kolb was enthusiastic and knowledgeable about the events which had occurred on November 11th, 1918, when a truce was declared ending the slaughter of 4 years. The last sentence of the speech in 1934, given to the students, was a dramatic plea to us to be a better generation than that of our parents. Our parents' generation had committed to the fighting and deaths of the European campaign, a campaign which saw the deaths of thousands of our soldiers and millions of English, French, German, Austro-Hungarian, and Italian soldiers and civilians. The Russians had fought, capitulated, and were, for that moment, spared the slaughter which would come later. He pleaded with us to become interested in a better world and pledged to have a peaceful life. We listened and were impressed. But as the subsequent years from 1934 to the present have demonstrated, we and the subsequent generations have been most unsuccessful as war after war has killed and destroyed throughout the world. His pleading for active participation in the cry for peace has been for naught, as the past 80 years have seen one conflagration after another. No one living has been spared heartache and loss. Many, and at times most of a generation's sons have left home and trained and fought for homeland on distant shores. So many have never returned, and as the methods of destruction have increased, the heartaches of mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters, friends and lovers have become nearly unbearable. Each of us has been touched in many ways and at many times. I would like to recall a number of personal losses which still affect me. As a sophomore in high school, I ran the mile. Not very fast, but I ran. And as I ran, I watched the backside of a runner from West Bend, an athlete who was superb, who was a class act in running, and who showed promise in living. He was pleasant, a lot of fun, and looked forward to running for the University of Wisconsin after graduation. We spoke at each meet, we ran, and he won. I watched him from the running pack. I watched him as he pulled away, ran to his daylight. I admired him, envied him, and looked forward to seeing him at the meets. At the last meet, he stated he had been drafted and running would have to wait until after the war. It was 1943. He entered, was assigned to the Tank Corps and died in the summer of 1944 during June, the month I entered the Navy. I have often wondered what his life would have been. Where was the generation of peace? From 1932 until 1944, I attended St. Killian School and Hartford High School. In my class for 12 years was a boy from the country. He lived 2 miles west of town. We became friends for each school year and acquaintances on Friday night on Main Street. He was a bright kid and somewhat of a mathematician. He showed promise and he desired to go to college. The draft came and went. The war was over and he had no money for college. He farmed, thought of school, but stayed on the farm. In 1950, the Korean conflict drew from another draft pool, and Leander was drafted. He went to Korea, became a sergeant in the medical corps, and was killed attending a wounded soldier, shot through the Red Cross on his helmet just a few days before his planned discharge, just before the armistice of Korea. He was killed, and all the promise of school, college, and medical school went with the bullet to the Red Cross target on his helmet. I was sickened. I was in medical school when his death occurred and looked at the empty chair in the lecture hall thinking of Leander filling the spot in a subsequent class. He was worthy of a chance to live his dream, a dream we had spoken of many Friday nights on Main Street. Over the next number of years, over the next generation, a generation without peace, another generation of war or peace actions or whatever, the great extended conflict of Vietnam occurred. It lasted for years, was waged each night on television, and each night we learned of the daily body count and saw the napalm bombs, heard of Agent Orange, and were frustrated. The bodies came home, were buried, and the population grew, developed new problems, and blanked out the conflict. I was practicing medicine during those years, and it was in the emergency room that I met a returned veteran from Vietnam. He presented a new type of loss caused by the war of the era. He was a problem. He was misunderstood by his neighbors, friends, and relatives. He did not understand his actions. He became a misfit in society. He became a cast-off. He became lost. He would show up in the emergency room late at night, on Sunday morning, Saturday night, and most any time. He ranted and raved, created a problem, and would storm out of the department after creating havoc. No one could understand his actions. One Saturday afternoon, he arrived at the ER and performed his usual antics. I was on call, and after trying to come to some understanding with him, I suggested he be admitted and we could interview him for an extended time. That extended time was 3 hours, during which he finally revealed his demonic problems. He had been drafted into the Army, was sent to Vietnam, spent 6 months in Saigon where he was introduced to drugs and alcohol, sex and entertainment. After that introduction, he was transferred to the front area of activity and assigned to the Graves Register's office. It became his sentence to patrol the jungles after a conflict and search out remains of bodies in the hot insect-infected pits of hell in the jungle. He spent 6 months doing his retrieval work, using drugs and alcohol liberally, and contracted hepatitis B. He was transferred to Japan, where street entertainment was available, and then transferred home and discharged. His life here in Washington County continued to deteriorate. He drank constantly to free his mind from the memories and to refrain from thoughts of family, friends, and life's rewards. He talked continuously of his demons, of his life and its ruins. After this confession of 2 to 3 hours, he agreed to hospitalization at the Veterans Hospital. He eventually was treated and has made a great life for himself and his family. These 3 stories, 2 deaths of promising young members of society, and the story of the demons of warfare bear out the reasons why Mr. Kolb, so long ago, searched for the generation to end all wars by seeking and working for peace. He searched and asked students to dedicate their lives to the search. He was disappointed with subsequent history, and the students to whom he spoke have been equally disappointed as we have lived out our lives for the past 70 years. So many lives have been lost. So much sorrow has existed in the world, and still, we are no closer to that generation of peacemakers. Will we ever find that generation? I doubt it, and I still mourn for my 3 friends, lost in the conflicts of old and fear for those of the future. Perhaps our generation should have tried harder when Mr. Kolb asked for our commitment for peace.
You know, I feel like I repeat this when we finish one of the letters that your father wrote, but it's very relevant.
It's spot on.
It's spot on. I mean, like bone chilling.
I know. You can insert any story from modern day
Right.
and it would fit right in
Yes.
of what's happening now.
And it is unfortunate that this letter has to be read in the context of what is happening in the world.
Right, right.
And I just find it amazing that his insight is still relevant for today.
Exactly.
And I wish the world could hear that,
I do too.
you know, and to get to that point of peace.
And kind of the cycle of wanting the world to hear that, starting with Mr. Kolb,
Yeah.
who that was his, just
Yeah.
humanity has been trying to do this for so long, and just when will we get it?
Right, right. And they say history repeats itself, and he's writing that right there.
Right.
And I don't know how long ago that letter was written.
I
10
think
years?
Yeah, about 10 years ago.
Okay, okay. And I know that you've been cataloging and going through a lot of his letters, and the great thing is that you're carrying on not only his legacy, but also the importance of the information in these letters.
Right, because there's so much
Right.
that just is kind of universal.
Right, yeah, and very historical facts.
Definitely.
Whether it's having to do with his personal life, living in Hartford, or whether it has to be globally. And I think that's really important that you're doing that work.
Right.
And I appreciate you coming in and sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for
You're
having me.
welcome. And to our viewers, as always, thank you for watching.